now's the time for the kids to come forward. So kids of all ages are invited to come forward. So if you guys could keep coming closer so that there's room for everybody. Logan, can you move up just a hair for me? That would be great. Very good. Jeff, I'm going to need that handheld again for this service. Very good. So come on up. Come on in and have a seat. Excellent. Come on in, everybody. So come on in, Aiden. Can you make room for everybody? Come on in. Come on in. Thank you so much. Come on in, guys. There's room for everybody. Just scooch on in. Good to see you. Come on up. Can you move over a little bit, bud? Good job. Well, it is so good to see all of you here today on this Easter morning. You all look so nice in your Easter dresses and shirt and tie. But we're excited because we're finishing up our Lent season. Remember, it's been a freedom from fear. And today we're talking about one of the scariest things of all, the fear of the unknown. And so to try and illustrate that, I actually spent some time this week writing a book for all of you, self-published. But before I tell you about this book, I don't know if you guys have ever done this. I'm assuming some adults in the room, but sometimes when you're reading a wonderful book and you are just so gripped by the words of this novel that you just can't wait to find out what happens at the end. So you actually skip ahead and read the end first. Adults, kids, how many of you have ever skipped ahead in a novel to find out how it ended? Yep, guilty as charged. And so when I was a kid, I always wanted to be part of the story, and I wasn't really big into reading, so my mom bought me a whole series of books called Choose Your Own Adventure. Sue, can we see that? That is the website for Choose Your Own Adventure. There's lots of different titles, and kids, if you've never read them before, they're really a neat book because they're works of fiction, but as you're reading, sometimes at the bottom of the page it gives you options. Like if you want to go down the forested road, you choose option A, and then you turn to page like 47. But if you want to go into the desert instead, you turn to page 20. And so by the end of the book, it seems like you have this brand new adventure depending on which choices you make. So I wrote my own Choose Your Own Adventure called The Journey of a Resurrection Life. Now, I need 2 volunteers. Now here's the thing. I need people who are amazing readers. Amazing, amazing readers. All right, so let's go 1, let's go 2. Okay, come on up, ladies. I know I'd like to get everybody. So these 2 young ladies are going to read this entire book. Now before you all moan and say, oh man, what did I get myself into? What I want you to understand, it's a very short book, and this is a Choose Your Own Adventure. Who would like to go first? You go first. Very brave. Okay, so stand right here. Hold the mic. Let's get a mic check. Say test, test, test. From Mr.
Test.
Very good, very good. All right, so I'm going to help you if you get stuck in any words. Again, it's a short book, everybody, but it is a Choose Your Own Adventure. If you want to kind of look over so you know the words. So start from the beginning. Page 1. Go ahead. Right up close into the mic. Go ahead and read.
You have a decent job with a good family and friends. You have accepted the truth that Jesus, who is God, came to earth to die on the cross for me and rose from the grave three days later. Yet things in life are still difficult sometimes. You start to feel afraid that things in life may be getting too hard to handle. You have a real fear of the unknown.
Okay, so what should you do? Read option A for everybody.
You choose to continue walking with the Lord because following Him seems to be the best option for your life.
Very good. And if you did that, you turn to page 4. What about option B?
You choose to try and walk away from the Lord because following Jesus just doesn't seem to be worth it. Okay, so are you going to follow Jesus and turn to page 4, or are you going to try to walk away from Him? What do you think? Option A. So we're turning to page 4. Good choice, good choice. Especially for Easter, right? Okay, no, you just chose your own adventure, so you got to continue the story. Okay, go ahead. Chapter 2, The Road. Right into the microphone there. Okay. There are days that things are difficult and you don't know what may happen next. Yet there are other followers of Jesus who surround me and encourage me when I feel afraid. Still, sometimes it just seems easier to take what seems to be a different road and live my life like I want to.
All right, so what do? Option A.
You make the difficult choice of walking with the Lord because following Him seems to be the only option of your life.
Or option B.
You choose to try and walk away from the Lord because following Jesus doesn't seem to be worth it anymore.
All right, you have another choice to make. Which one do you want to do? She's thinking about it.
try.
You want to, very good, option A. Very good. Oh, we've reached the end. All right, chapter 3, the end, real loud, and then you're all done.
Okay. Even though things are so difficult sometimes, you realize that there must be a bigger plan that you just don't see. Yet the more you take steps to follow Jesus, the more you come to see that He has got things figured out. And it's okay. If you don't know what comes next, Jesus has told you how the story is going to end. He is always going to keep His promises.
All right, let's give a round of applause. You're right now wishing you went first, didn't you? So the same story, I'm going to summarize, but then we're going to have you make the other decision, okay? So you have a decent job, a good family, you've accepted that Jesus is God and came to die on the cross for you. He rose from the grave, yet things in life are still difficult sometimes. You start to feel afraid and things in life may be getting too hard to handle. So you too have a real fear of the unknown. What should you choose to do? So read option B that you're going to choose. Real loud.
You choose to try and walk away from the Lord because following Jesus just doesn't seem to be worth it.
Okay, so we got to turn to page 2. Let's see what this is. Chapter 2, the road. Go ahead, real loud, because no one's heard this part yet.
Have a great fear.
Having a great fear.
Having a great fear of the unknown. You make the choices that seem right to you and think will make you happy. Over and over again, you try to control situations, only things never seem to work out like you thought they were.
That happens to all of us. Turn to page 3. Go for it.
You never seem to find true and lasting fulfillment in life. It continues to seem like you're on the wrong road.
Okay, so it seems like you're on the wrong road. What do you do? Read the 2 options for everybody.
Option A, you make the difficult choice of walking with the Lord because following Him seems to be the only option for your life. Option B, you choose to try and walk away from the Lord because following Jesus just doesn't seem to be worth it anymore.
All right. In front of all these people, which option are you going to choose? A or B?
A.
She chose A. Awesome. All right. It ends the same way. It's amazing. Go ahead and read.
Even though things are still difficult sometimes, you realize that there must be a bigger plan that you just don't see. Yet the more you take steps to follow Jesus, the more you come to see that He has got things figured out, and it's okay. If you don't know what comes next, Jesus has told you how this story is going to end, and He always keeps His promises.
Very good. Let's give her a round of applause. Well done. Now, should any of these ladies wanted to turn to page 2 again, notice what happens. Every time you turn back to page 2, if you would choose the option B, it's just this endless cycle of going back and back and back and back again. But if you notice, when we finally recognize who Jesus is and we begin to walk with Him, the ending is the same, no matter who reads the story. And what we're going to see in today's passage is that, yes, Jesus died. But just like He said He would, He came back to life on the 3rd day. And because He kept His promise there, we know He always keeps His promises, even though we go through difficult and dark times. So good job listening, guys. I'm going to grab some candy here. Can you hold that for me? All right, good job. Thank you. So you guys can grab a piece of candy before you return to your seats. If you attend preschool or 1st grade, you can head to rest stop with your parents' or grandparents' permission. Everyone else, if you can open up the Bibles to the book of Matthew, we're going to be in chapter 28 today. So good job, guys. Good job reading. Fantastic. Great. Again, if you're a guest with us today, thank you so much for joining us as we finish up our Lent season. All Lent long, we've been talking about the freedom from fear. And today, we're talking about probably one of the scariest things for people, and that is the fear of the unknown. And so when you think about that, we recognize that we live in this world where people are gripped with fear. Now, sometimes, I was talking to Brother Jeff the other day, and sometimes fear can be a good thing because it warns us of danger or it keeps us out of trouble. The fear that we're talking about this Lent season, specifically today, is the type of fear that when we get overwhelmed, we get paralyzed. Almost to the point where we feel like we can't do anything and perhaps even faint. And what we see is that we live in this world where it seems like the ground beneath us is constantly shifting, and so more and more people are feeling trapped. Imagine for a moment you're stuck in a terrible storm, and it's just this awful storm. Your reality is going to be that storm. And you begin to become afraid because you don't know when that storm is going to end, if ever. And for that moment, you feel like it's never going to end. Sometimes when people have a fear of the unknown, they get into this pattern where they just go into a downward spiral because they are gripped with fearing what comes next. I don't know what to do next, or I don't know what's going to happen the next day. But yet to that, we see in today's passage this great message where even though we go through dark and difficult things, when it's the Lord's timing, suddenly light breaks into it. And on Easter Sunday, we recognize that we don't have to have a fear of the unknown. So keep that in mind as we take a look at today's passage, starting with verse 1, where we see that after the Sabbath, at the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. Now there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Now the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified, for he's not here. He has risen just as he said. Now come and see the place where he lay. Then go and tell the disciples that he is risen from the dead, and he's going on ahead of you into Galilee, for there you will see him. And now I have told you." So the women, they hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. But suddenly Jesus met with them, saying, "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. But then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." Knowing that fear is something that humanity wrestles with, we saw in today's passage 4 times this concept of fear. 2 in the noun form, phobos, and 2 in the verb form, phobo. And what we see is that this is something that God understands that humanity is going to wrestle with. But let's just pretend, because this story, let's face it, for those of you that grew up in a church and those of you that make a regular point to come to worship, know this story backwards and forwards. But let's just pretend, just for this morning, that this is a choose-your-own-adventure. And let's pretend that the people who are part of this story made some different choices. What would that look like? For example, here you have the followers of Jesus who witnessed Jesus dying on the cross. Now, Jewish law said that that body could not hang on the cross, so it was taken down and immediately put in a tomb. And so Mary and the other women didn't have time to properly prepare the body of Jesus. And they were unable on that dark Saturday to even leave their home, much less work. And so you can imagine those days of darkness. You can imagine how you wondered, how are they ever going to move on? But let's just say, as the sun began to come up on that Easter day, if they were trying to choose their own adventure, what had happened if they were so gripped with depression, gripped with fear, gripped with anxiety that they just decided to stay home that morning? They said, "No, what's the point? Jesus is gone. He's never coming back." How different would the world be if they chose to stay home that Easter morning? But thankfully, after the Sabbath ended and at the dawn of that first day of the week, that Sunday, the Lord's Day, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, they anxiously went to go look to the tomb. So you can imagine they have the burial spices in their arms and they're quickly going to the tomb and they're thinking, wow, we're going to have to ask those professional Roman soldiers to move the stone away because we can't certainly do it. And so filled with all of these thoughts and anxiety and fearing the unknown, when suddenly a violent earthquake took place. And an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, going to the tomb, rolls back the stone, and then sits on it. His appearance was so bright and shining, it was like lightning. His clothes were as white as snow. Now, I've never seen anything like that before. But I can guarantee you, I would be terrified. And as we see these professional Roman soldiers who had conquered the world, when they were in that position, they too were afraid. So much so that they trembled with fear. Have you ever been so scared that you just trembled? These guys were so afraid they became like dead men, which means they fainted. Now, I need to be honest with you, I have a fear of needles. And people that know me know that when we do a blood drive here, I just don't come in. Because you know what? Hey, how's it going? And I see the needle, I'll be like, Lord! Boom. And then they'll have to do the smelling salt, and it's happened before. It's not fun. But immediately I had this fear and anxiety that I pass out. It's terrible. It's very embarrassing. I hope no one ever finds out about that. But for those Roman soldiers, these guys are supposed to be tough, and yet in the face of this blazing angel, boom, they fall and they faint. Now, if this was a choose-your-own-adventure, what if one of those soldiers, let's call him Bruticus, stands up and takes up his sword and says, I'm going to get you, angel of the Lord. I don't think that would turn out so well for him. But thankfully, they just all pass out. These women also having great fear. Notice what the first thing that the angel says to them. Fear not. Do not be afraid. I know this is a scary time and it's been a couple dark days, but listen, I know why you're here. Why did he know that? God must have revealed it. You're here looking for Jesus, who we remember were crucified on the cross. And look at this testimony. He's not here. He's risen, just as he said. Jesus always keeps his promises. In those dark days between Good Friday, Saturday, until the sun came up on Easter, I can imagine them wrestling with, did Jesus really mean what he said? Would he really come back after 3 days? Sure enough, the angel testifies, yes, he's alive. He is risen indeed, just as he said. Not only that, he invites them, come and see the place where he lay. Now, if this was a choose-your-own-adventure, and you heard that, these women had to say, I don't believe you. Silly angel. People can't come back from the dead. But no, did you notice? They went into the tomb and saw where his body lay, and it wasn't there. So now they had visible evidence. They didn't just have Jesus' word. They didn't just have the angel's word. Now they had visible evidence that sure enough, he wasn't there anymore. But immediately the angel gives them a job to do. Go quickly and tell the disciples that he has risen from the dead and is going on ahead of you into Galilee, for there you will see him. Wouldn't you want to see a person that was dead alive? Certainly. And the angel says, now I have told you. He's like, peace out. He drops the mic and he goes back up to heaven. And so the women have a choice to make, right? If this was a choose-your-own-adventure, are they going to listen to what the angel said? Are they going to be like, man, this is just too crazy for me? And besides, if we go back to the disciples, no one's going to believe us when we say that tomb was empty. We're just going home and going to enjoy some ham and mashed potatoes and all this other things. They could have done that, but imagine how different our world would have been if they would have chose option B. But instead, they choose option A. And with excitement and anticipation, the women hurried away from the tomb. And notice what Matthew points out. They were afraid. And yet that fear was mixed with joy. And ran. They didn't just, hey, this is a beautiful Easter morning. Oh. No, they ran. They hurried to go and tell the disciples, and suddenly, and we don't know it's because whether they chose option A or Y, but the Lord shows up. Suddenly, Jesus meets them and says greetings. Now, this is one of those times where English does not do it justice. Right? Because if someone you saw died on a cross, buried in a grave, shows up, would you really think he'd be like, greetings? How are you today? Right? Now that may be an appropriate thing for me to say, greetings. Good to see you. But for the Son of God to come back from the dead, the word there in Greek is actually more like this. And I'm going to act it out for you. Ready? Rejoice! That's what he said when he appeared. Again, that would be scary in itself. And if you were all sleeping, I'm sorry I just woke you up. But the thing of it is, remember, they were mixed emotions with fear and joy, and he says, rejoice! And so immediately, I always pick on Joe. Can I pick on you this time? Okay. Joe's always sitting in the front row. Are your feet clean? Okay, so put your feet out a little bit so I don't hurt myself. Let's just say I haven't seen this brother in so long. I'm like, you're here! Oh, it's so good to see you. Your feet are very clean, by the way. By grabbing a hold of this man's feet, I know that he's here, and I'm not imagining it. And so when the women fell to the ground and grabbed the feet of our Lord, they knew it wasn't a vision, it wasn't a ghost, it was really him. They could touch his feet and they could enjoy his presence. And notice what Jesus says, do not be afraid. If you're here today and you're overwhelmed, if you don't hear anything else that I say, hear this word from the Lord. Do not be afraid. afraid. But then right away, Jesus reminds them that they have a mission to go. Tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me as well. They have a job to do. Not only are they supposed to fear not, but now they have to go and tell. And so again, these women, if this was a choose your own adventure, they could have chose option B. They could have just been there holding Jesus' feet and said, Jesus is great, man. I love you, man. Good to see you. I love you. No, you guys got to go, no, I'm good. Send somebody else. I'm just going to keep you all to myself. And just start. Sometimes Christians want to do that. They just want to keep Jesus all to themselves. And they don't want to follow the command to go and tell the world that he lives. How different would our world be if those women would have stayed there and just held on to Jesus and not gone and tell? None of us would be here today, I argue. And so as we reflect on this passage, as we think about the Choose Your Own Adventure book that I wrote to the kids, and I'm glad this worked out as well as it did. When, as I've always said, when the Lord gives me an idea, I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, do it. And I did, and thankfully, it worked out well. Because what I wanted to show to the kids is that if either of these ladies, after walking away from the Lord and making that choice, finding that they seem to find no true and lasting fulfillment in life, it continues to seem like they're on the wrong road, what do? You choose to try and walk away from the Lord, guess what happens? You go back to page 2. And then you read page 3. And if you still make that choice, you go back to page 2. And you get into this terrible spiral where once again we try to do things the way that we want to. In all honesty, humanity's been wrestling with this from the very beginning. Adam and Eve in the garden heard what God said. And they said, did he really say that? Really? No. We want to know the end of all things. We want to know both good and evil. And they disregarded what God said, and sin and death and cancer and depression and all these terrible things we still deal with coming into the world. But God didn't give up. He knew how the story was going to end. And in the same way as the kids illustrated, even when we get into these patterns where we think the storm is never going to end, that we think that no one loves us, that we think that doing things our own way isn't going to work out for us, we get to that point where finally we know we have to realize what Jesus is expecting of us. Now, if you're here today and all of this is very new and you're like, yeah, I don't know if I buy this, see me after the service, or see Maria. We have Bibles if you don't have one at your house. And just briefly, by show of hands, how many of you have ever been reading a novel and skipped to the end because you want to see? Be honest. Come on. Yeah. You're so like, I can't handle it. And then you're like, oh. If you take a Bible home with you today, you have my permission to skip ahead to the end and read what happened. Because the same thing happens for every single person that has ever lived. We all will need to bow down, and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. But while we wait for that time to come, many of us, friends, family, classmates, are kind of stuck in this, going back and doing it again. What's that definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Right? We all do that sometimes. And so my prayer for you today, and that of RedArrow Ministries, is that you're able to turn the page. That you're able to recognize what God has called us to do. And that your prayer today will be knowing that the end of the story has already been written. We know that even though things are still difficult sometimes, we realize that there must be a bigger plan that we just don't see. Yet more and more when we take steps to follow Jesus, the more we come to see that He has got things figured out. And it's okay if we don't know what comes next. Jesus has told us how the story is going to end. Do you know how He knows? Because He wrote it. And He always keeps His promises. That's why we gather together today. That's why we gather here every Sunday. To remember the empty grave. To remember in those dark, deep valleys that the storm will end. And the sun will come out. And we all declare that He is risen indeed. Because He always keeps His promises. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank You for this day. And we thank You for this wonderful story that isn't some work of fiction, That isn't something that people just like to tell in order to sell Easter cards or lilies. No, that this event happened. There were people who experienced it. And even though they could have chose to go a different path, they chose to follow you. And even though they were scared, and even though they were depressed, and even though they didn't know if the sun would come up that Easter Sunday, they trusted in your word. Help us to do the same. And so when we have friends and family who have that terrible fear of the unknown that paralyzes them and leads them to do terrible, unspeakable things, help us to stand in their way and say, no. Jesus loves you. He died for you. And He rose from the grave. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.